Greetings! I'm Teek, and this is the show where I go over things that were of interest to me in the last week. Fortunately, I have a great many interests, so there's probably something for you here too. At least, if you follow comic book news. The industry was rocked on Friday with news that publisher DiDio had been unceremoniously ousted from DC Comics. Bleeding Cool broke the story, but while there are plenty of rumors floating about, there's still a lot unknown about many of the details, including the reason for him leaving, or whether he was fired, quit, or something in between. DiDio joined DC Comics in 2002, and for the last 10 years has served as co-publisher for the company alongside Jim Lee. In that time, DiDio has overseen a number of large-scale changes in the DC lineup, some more well-received than others. For many years, he's been a punching bag for fans, unsatisfied with one storyline or another, though it's impossible to say which of the more or less popular ideas that have made it to the page have started in his head. Likewise, his relationship with industry professionals seems to have been equally mixed, with even many of his well-wishers prefacing their reaction tweets by noting their disagreements with the man. Naturally, it's impossible to say how DiDio's departure will affect the DC line in the future, to say nothing of what it means for writers and artists down the chain. Yet another massive continuity upheaval is said to be in the works, but at this point, who knows how things will play out. And unless you want to deep dive into the Friends Reunion special or the new color for the Nintendo Switch, that's pretty much all I have for news this week. Yeah, it's just that thin, so let's move on to releases, starting with The Invisible Man. Oh no, he's invisible and nobody believes her, so she thinks she's going insane, just like every other invisible person story ever told. Speaking of stories being retold, there's Wendy. I always find Peter Pan stories to be kinda weird because they make you want to root for Arrested Development. Movie looks kinda neat though. Over on television, Altered Carbon's second season premieres this week on Netflix, which means I really need to get around to watching that first one. And in video games, releasing on Steam this week is Obscurity, a top-down action game that has you shifting between two characters in a dark cartoon world. Speaking of which, The Unholy Society is a game, I think. You play as definitely not John Constantine in a wacky occult world battling the forces of evil with the lens of truth, I guess? That looks neat. For something more sci-fi, Genesis Alpha 1 Deluxe Edition is a roguelite first-person shooter and part shipbuilding game. It looks like it's just on the verge of getting sued for infringing on the Aliens copyright, if that helps paint a picture of what kind of game it is. Meanwhile, Capcom's Collection continues with Mega Man Zero ZX Legacy Collection on PC and consoles, covering Mega Man Zero 1, 2, 3, 4, and Mega Man ZX and ZX Advent. And speaking of old games getting a fresh coat of paint, Wasteland Remastered gives a new look to the 1988 RPG, which means it will either thrill classic fans or disappoint them greatly. And for another old game getting a new release, Hero Must Die Again is an atypical RPG that puts you in the role of a fantasy hero dealing with the aftermath of using a life-shortening ability to defeat the final boss. The game was originally released for mobile devices in 2007, saw a PS Vita release in 2016, and is now headed for PC, PS4, and the Nintendo Switch. For those looking for a survival horror fix, Dust Heaven on the PC and Switch is a bit cartoony looking, but it seems to have the slow-paced puzzle solving one would want in the genre. One Punch Man, a hero nobody knows, is a fighting game for PC and consoles, though one would expect there'd be an inherent balance issue concerning the game's titular character. Insurgents Second Assault is this week's RPG Maker shoutout, and it sure looks like they put a lot of effort into the art assets on this one. And for more retro goodness, Wallachia Reign of Dracula is the Sega Genesis Castlevania knockoff that arrived 25 years too late. Finally on Steam, Loot Box Life is an odd-looking Metroidvania game that puts you in the role of a ball bouncing around and collecting new movement powers. Over on the Epic Games Store, it's another double feature this week for free games. Fearia is a fantasy-based deck-building game, and Assassin's Creed Syndicate has you remembering your ancestors' blood-soaked history in 1860s London. On consoles, there's good news for rhythm game fans. Ooh La La returns for Space Channel 5 VR Kinda Funky Newsflash on the PS4, and Xbox One owners can finally get in on the psychedelic adventure that is Sayonara Wild Hearts. On the Nintendo Switch, Rune Factory 4 Special is an interesting-looking RPG with gardening, monster taming, crafting, and a new newlywed mode. For fighting game fans, Samurai Shodown is making its way to the Switch so you can get your Evo practice in on the go. And finally, One Finger Death Punch 2 brings its crazy stick figure fighting to the Nintendo handheld. That leaves us with this week's awesome video. Hat Living Gamer is back with a series of classic movie scenes redone in the style of Pokemon. That's everything for this week, so what's your favorite era of DC Comics? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and maybe give me a like if you think I deserved it, although considering how light this week was, I would understand if you didn't. Nevertheless, I hope you enjoyed this video and have a great week!